This is the other side, part 4 of 4. Now, today, me and Alec Pike are going to be talking about some of our threats to our nation. And now, the first one we would like to talk about is Iran and threats they're posing to our nation with their nuclear program. Now, Alec, what do you know about their nuclear program? Do you know how far it has really gone so far?
Well, Iran's nuclear program right now is just in the uranium enrichment process, which means that their nuclear research in terms of actual scale, say here we're close to making a nuclear weapon. Right now, Iran's right about here. They're in the process of developing the elements needed and enriching the elements needed for, ostensibly, most countries would use them for nuclear power, but most people are afraid Iran will use them for nuclear weapons. Like I said, they're mainly staged in the uranium enrichment process. The UN sanctions that have been placed on them, the US sanctions that have been placed on them, a lot of the trade tariffs have really hurt their financial ability to move their nuclear program along. It is still a threat, and it's something that we should look out for, but in terms of actual weaponized viability, the Iranian government itself does not technically have the capabilities as far as we can tell. However, it could be harboring people that may.
But how would they actually be a threat to us? I mean, even Pakistan and Israel in the Middle East have nuclear weapons. Why should we be so afraid of Iran when not even Abu Ahmadinejad is running the country?
Well, the reason, one, that we should I don't want to say be afraid of Iran, but we should be cautious with Iran is because, like I said, they've defied UN sanctions, they've defied US sanctions, they've defied plenty of extraterritorial treaties and continue to fly in the face of them. This is not exactly a stable leadership we're dealing with here. They're willing to let their own people go under massive tariffs and massive inflation to the point where it would cost the equivalent of some 500 of our US dollars, like for us to go to the store and buy bread. That's what the average Iranian is having to pay in terms of their own currency, is the equivalent of 500 of our dollars, give or take at any time because of the varying inflation. We need to be cautious about this because any country that is willing to put the needs of its citizens behind a program for its own, I don't want to say nefarious, but nebulous purposes, that's something that sets off alarm bells. Whereas Israel, Pakistan has been mildly helpful or hindrance. We can never really tell with their intelligence gathering or anything like that, but Pakistan has no interest in further destabilization of their relatively quiet corner. Israel, they're not going to go into any sort of nuclear strikes or anything simply because, mainly because they've got the home front to worry about with Hamas and the Gaza Strip. They're always going to be focused on that, and they don't want to risk Israeli collateral. And right now, with Iran being as financially destitute as they are, they're not posing a threat to other people in the region, threatening to destabilize, but it is something that does need to be watched. And if sanctions aren't obeyed and they continue down the path of enrichment, then it is time to maybe look at other forms of involvement, be it military, be it extraterritorial through NATO or the UN, and actually put not necessarily boots on the ground, but keep inspectors there, keep people making sure that programs don't come to fruition, because quite frankly, up until this point, sanctions have proved not to work.
Now let's real quick talk about everybody's favorite Asian country, North Korea, everybody's best friend. What do you know about their capabilities with their nuclear weapons, and what are they doing right now? Like, I've heard they've tested a few missiles or bombs, and they've tested missiles, but the missiles really are just duds and are really unpredictable and short circuit.
Well, the joke is that, of course, if North Korea is aiming at America, holy crap, Russia better watch out.
Yeah.
But, the simple fact of the matter is we have very unreliable intelligence when it comes to North Korea's capabilities, in part because they are a very locked down country, also partly due to the fact that they are right now very decentralized. Kim Jong-un has just stepped up to power, and the military leaders in his country could still possibly be feeling him out for a coup. His father commanded loyalty, his father was a little eccentric, but the military leaders of North Korea stuck with him. And I mean, we've started to see a buildup of tension in North Korea. We started to see a buildup of rhetoric from Kim Jong-un as well as these military advisors of his that could potentially lead to furtherance of, I don't want to say American attacks because there have been none so far, but aggressive anti-American sentiment and testing of weapons that could be used against us.
Well, why should America be so worried about North Korea? I mean, China's right there. Russia's even closer to North Korea than we are. And if they pose any threat to them too with nuclear strikes, shouldn't they just take care of them?
Well, I mean, that's obviously, like I said, a solid thing. China, you're not going to see much intervention from them. China right now is really focused on building their fiscal side of their country. They're focused on kind of acclimating places like Beijing and Hong Kong. They're pushing for more global industry in China. They're trying to kind of get away from the stigma of communism that they have. They want to present themselves as a more capitalistic communism society. They recognize that the free market is for all intents and purposes, the battlefield of the 21st century. Russia is a country it's so large. I mean, and they've got all these problems to worry about, but I don't think Russia's worried about North Korea for one reason, because that's Vladimir Putin. I mean, to be honest, not saying the man's crazy or anything, but that is a man that if you are a world leader and you look at him and you say, I know he has nuclear capabilities, he has a much larger army, and he's right next door and they can scramble and they can intercept, North Korea is not going to be foolish enough to try and capitalize on any opportunity to attack Russia, simply because a retaliatory strike would virtually decimate them. Same goes for China. China, has a few nuclear weapons, has a few ballistic armaments, but they have sheer numbers and proximity, and that's why they're not going to strike at them. Also, the anti-American rhetoric, it's very popular. It's very easy to get people riled up, and like I said, it goes back to the fact that North Korea is a very controlled society. Their media is all controlled by their great leader. Yeah. They've got a lot of insularity going on. So a lot of the things that we're hearing, we kind of have to take with a grain of salt and hope that they're not true on the other hand. I mean, it's a very cautiously optimistic thing. You can laugh and you can poke fun at it, but it does need to be taken seriously that they are attempting to develop these things, especially when they are in close proximity to places like China and Japan, who are much better at making components for any sort of electronic thing. And China has some of the largest collections of rare earth minerals, which are increasingly used in all the modern technology that we use, along with every sort of microtransistor that controls every sort of missile guidance system or any high-tech weaponry equipment. Going back to Iran as well, one reason we also need to be worried about Iran along with North Korea is their proximity to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was recently discovered to have a huge, massive rare earth mineral deposits just littered all around the country, and it's kind of a race between China and the U.S. to see who can buy drilling rights and all that kind of stuff.
Of course.
Also, we could be looking at potential looters making their way from Iran and shipping a trail to North Korea for these rare earth minerals where they could be processed outside of the country. In this age of global terror and globalization, we've got to watch out for a literal paper trail of everything. These minerals can be shipped from country to country, refashioned into missile components, and then brought back in, and the whole job could be contracted out to where the North Korean government science team or the Iranian government science team never has to touch it. They just pay the money, and they've got one working missile by buying the components and farming it out.
All right. Now let's talk real quick about another one of our possible enemies, extraterrestrials. Are they a threat?
Well, let's look at this two ways. We can look at this the skeptical way and say that there's no other planets capable of supporting life as we know it in the universe. But I think that's kind of a foolish thought, actually. Science fiction and any sort of thing like that, because most of our science nowadays does come from the science fiction of the past. Science fiction teaches us that, there's a lot of places with a lot of a lot of planets have different physics based solely on their magnetic field structure, the makeup of their planet, whether it be gaseous, liquid, the metal core. There's a lot of places where physics and things like that differ, and there's possible that life could evolve in those places. So assuming that an extraterrestrial threat should arise, we've got to take into account A, are they hostile? B, could they actually survive long enough in our atmosphere with our own laws of physics, with our planets nitrogen, oxygen-rich atmosphere? We've got to take into consideration, will they be able to exist here? I think honestly, if the possibility that they are, that they could, the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy have already been working on, for layman's terms, railgun technology. Magnetically accelerated projectiles, which would replace chemically accelerated projectiles like bullets from gunpowder and things like that. It's much more scientific, it's cleaner in terms of it only uses energy. You're able to get a lot more kinetic force out of it. The projectiles don't have to be specially made. We can have them right now we're testing the technology in labs. We're hoping to install them on battleships. Basically, they operate on the same principle of the trains in Japan that are able to move at such high speeds. You magnetically charge two polarized coils, and the resulting charge is transferred to a metal or any other sort of projectile in the charge field, and eventually it can't hold the charge and is shot out at a rate of about anywhere from 900 miles a second to 2,000 miles a second.
All right. Now, one last question. If we are to be invaded, which alien movie with invading premise do you think is most realistic that would happen to us?
Honestly, even though I do love Independence Day because of Bill Pullman, greatest fictional president ever, aside from Harrison Ford, I'd have to say Battle for Los Angeles, simply because if we do look at an invasion of Earth, they mentioned very specifically in that movie, it's an invasion for resources, and the first thing you do is wipe out the indigenous population. And I think if we're going to be invaded, we're going to be invaded hard. It's going to be a surprise attack. We're going to be wiped out because we won't have the technological capabilities to fight off an advanced spacefaring race. It's science fiction taken to a very realistic portrayal, I feel like.
Well, I think this will be more like Independence Day because Jeff Goldblum's in that movie.
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum's fantastic.
Jeff Goldblum.
Well, anyways, we've run out of time. Thanks for tuning in to the fourth part of The Other Side. Thank you.
Thank you.